Alright, hi there, my name is Zach Cretin, and for my 21st Century Skills lesson plan, I decided to go for a history topic. I plan to be a history teacher, so I went with probably the most famous history topic of all time, which is World War II. This would be a 5-day lesson with given 45-minute periods. This would be for 10th grade global, and for the description of my lesson, students would learn the various aspects of World War II, including the causes, the important people in it, major events such as battles, the Holocaust, the dropping the atomic bombs, and of course the effects and consequences of the war, which would lead us into our next unit, which would be like the Cold War. So the learning range for this would be a full class, more simple lecture style, and the standards addressed as far as New York State Framework for Social Studies. This is 10.5, Section 10.5 on the Social Studies Framework, which is unresolved global conflict from 1914 to 1945. Now, obviously, that details World War I as well as II. This lesson would just be World War II and a little bit of the interwar period leading up to it. So for the ISTE standards, this would help with knowledge construction, where students get to evaluate the accuracy, perspective, credibility, and relevance of information, media, data, and other resources. I plan to use a lot of pictures, images, and videos to aid in this lesson on the various days. And students will be able to, as an objective, they will be able to interpret both primary and secondary sources to gain an understanding of various aspects of World War II and a better understanding of who was involved, what happened, and how this affected our world as a whole and how it continues to affect our world today. So for the assessment tools that I would use an Edpuzzle assignment as a homework on the first night. The first day would mostly be students getting a background info on it, and we would have an Edpuzzle assignment at the end. And then at the very end of day 5, we would round things out with a Kahoot review game before the unit test. So the student materials that they would need for this, they would need a computer with internet access, they need access to Google Classroom, Google Slides and Docs, and obviously Kahoot and Edpuzzle. Teacher would need a smartboard or some form of display up in the front. Obviously they would need Google Classroom, Slides, Docs, Kahoot, Edpuzzle, as well as YouTube. I plan to use several YouTube videos to pull, so that would be very helpful. Now, the procedure is pretty straightforward. Students come in, there'll be either a do now or a discussion prompt up on the board for them. They come in, sit down, and get going. Day 1, their do now is to think about some of the important events and people from World War II that they already know of and be prepared to share. So just take a few minutes, talk about or jot down some info about who they know, what they know, be it, Hitler was a bad guy or Joseph Stalin implemented communism in such a way that allowed them to believe themselves allies, and then they could go off on the whole thing, or just whatever they know. Each presentation would be done via Google Slides, so they would be able to view up on the screen, and I would post each presentation on the Google Classroom for them to review afterwards. The school I work in utilizes Google Classroom very much, and it has proven very effective, so I find that a very, very helpful digital tool. Kids can use it for review, they can use it to post homework, and it's very easy to set up Google Meet and just post the link right there on the top. So God forbid we ever have to go remote again, we could Zoom right in or Google Meet right in, bring in the kids who are at home, and we can proceed. For the first day, the homework I would have them complete an Edpuzzle. Now, this Edpuzzle assignment that I have utilizes a YouTube video where I have embedded questions throughout. They go in, they start watching, they will hit a point where the video pauses and it'll ask them a question on the section they just completed watching. If they need to, they can go back in and rewatch it and answer the question. There are some, it's mostly multiple choice, there's some short response, Now these short response, I would have them jot their answer down either on a separate Google Doc or on a piece of paper to come in and discuss that the next day. That would be part of our do now the next day. But I have found Edpuzzles to be very helpful. I've seen several different teachers utilize them in their classes, and the students like them. It makes for a pretty rapid homework assignment because they know just how long the video is going to be. For example, my video is a 13-minute one, so it'll be very simple for them to go in. They see, oh, this homework's only going to take 13 minutes, maybe 15 counting answering the questions. So they would go in, they watch a video. The video I picked is it's a pretty good review. It covers most of the major events of World War II. And the guy who does this history series on YouTube, he's a very, I personally find his videos very good. The students I've seen watch him like him a lot. And it'd be pretty simple for them to do. If they have any trouble, they can go back and watch the section. I can see the feedback right away, which multiple choice questions they get right, who's doing well, who needs some assistance, and then we could proceed from there. Kids who need extra help, extra review, I would know what I have to review before the final assessment. Then for days 2 and 3 in this class would be talking about the war itself. We'd start off with like the German invasion of Poland, cover the major events from there to the dropping of the atomic bombs. I allotted 2 days for this because I figured it'd be easier if we had more time to space out some of these events. I could use more visuals, more videos. I could use stuff like Darkest Hour, Enemy at the Gates, Band of Brothers, The Pacific. Those are all great movies. They detail pretty important events, such as Winston Churchill prepping for the Battle of Britain. Enemy at the Gates is about the Battle of Stalingrad. Band of Brothers is about paratroopers from D-Day through the end of the war in Europe, and The Pacific is about the war in the Pacific. Now, obviously, there's some insanely graphic content in a lot of this, so it would be short clips just to help the students get a better idea, such as the on D-Day, troops dropping in Japan, the Japanese front. It'd show them beach assaults, stuff like that. We talked about the Battle of Pearl Harbor, and we would talk about a bunch of the different things, but the end of this would be the dropping of the atomic bombs. And if we had time at the end of those 2 days, I'd like to organize a little debate, just one side or the other. Would it have been a good idea? Would they, if they were in charge, the students, would they have dropped the atomic bombs? You get the people who would on one side, people who would not have on the other side, and they would have a little debate there to just to get some thoughts out there, allow them to express their own opinions. Day 4 would be about the Holocaust. Now this would start off with a do now, again, just detailing what they know about the Holocaust. Be prepared to share that with the class, because not everybody knows as much as everybody else. Some people may know more than others, so just to get a feel of where they're at. Then the presentation would delve deeper into the Holocaust, talk about Hitler's thoughts way back, as far back as when he wrote his book Mein Kampf. Then in 1933, when he seizes power, start talking about some of the policies, like forcing them to wear the Star of David, talk about Kristallnacht, where they're all rounded up, forced to ghettos, and then the creation of the concentration camp network and the systems that they use for mass murder. We'd use a lot of images, videos, and footage from these, such as, again, Band of Brothers. They find a concentration camp, very powerful scene. There's 2 movies that I would use, Schindler's List, and there's an Italian film that I watched called Life is Beautiful. Very good tools, both of them, for really nailing home how awful the Holocaust was. And then for homework after this day, I would have them pick 2 political cartoons, write a paragraph on each one, and submit that via Google Classroom. Allow me to view their work right away, see what their thoughts are, where they're at with their thoughts on the war, what they find interesting. And then that would lead into day 5. I'd ask for some volunteers to talk about the political cartoons from the night before. And then this is the final day. We would talk about the effects and consequences of World War II, like the global death toll, how much money was spent, the winners, the losers, and some of the after effects, such as the formation of the United Nations. Now, this would help get us set up for review for the next couple of days, and it would transition into our next unit, which would start off talking about the Cold War. Now, the end of this class is where we would use our Kahoot, which students, I know for a fact, love. They go nuts for it. Never failed to see it excite an entire classroom, and the winner would get bonus points for their upcoming unit test. Now, I like Kahoot too because it shows you, as a teacher, it shows how many students got each question right. So if there's some questions where I see the students are struggling, this would be a very, very helpful tool to see who needs more work or which questions students are struggling with, so I know what I have to review more. And like, for example, if 19 out of 20 students get one question right, I know that for the most part they've got that one down. But if 6 students out of 20 get one question right, then I know that question is going to be an issue. We're going to have to address that. So that's where the evaluation comes into play. With the Edpuzzles, I get their results on the multiple choice right away, like for their grade. For the Kahoot, I can see how they do on each individual question. It gives some, I believe it gives some statistics at the end, which are pretty helpful. And when we get to modifications, students with special needs receive fill-in notes or a note-taking buddy. Students with a TA, the TA would get a copy of the lesson plan just so they know where we're at. Large print copies of the PowerPoints if people want printed copies of the PowerPoint presentations. I know sometimes people take a while to fill in some notes, write in some notes, so it would be helpful to just have copies that they can go back to and reference right away. And of course, all presentation materials used in the class, all the videos, all the presentations, they would all be made available on the classroom for them to go back in and view at their own pace. But the main point here, because we're talking about the digital usage in class, obviously the use of Google Classroom, valuable tool, allows the students to much more easily facilitate their classroom from school to home, because they'll be more familiar with it. It's like, oh, we pulled this stuff up in the classroom. I can pull that same stuff up when I go home. The assessment tools, again, Edpuzzle, really great way to get kids to have a video that they can quick reference for their questions. You know, they see a small chunk of a video, can answer a question right about that, go right back if they need to look at it again. And Kahoot, fun review competition, gets kids excited for learning. And I think that's about it. Hope you enjoyed my little presentation here, and have a good one.